Hello, Internet. Welcome to episode 285 of the Assorted Calibers podcast, the Second Amendment podcast that has a little bit for everyone. I'm Weer'd, and she's wonderful. She's amazing. She is more brilliant than the sun itself. Erin Paulette. How you doing, Erin?
Oh, dear. I thought I had left 2023 behind me, but it looks like it's followed me, and 24 is going to be the same. Really, the only question is if it's just going to be the same, or if it's going to be like 23, but harder. I don't feel like going into detail. If you follow my social media, if you read my blog, you'll have an idea of what's going on, and I don't need to talk about the rest. I'm just exhausted, and let me put it to you like this. I don't seek out the news, like traditional media for the news. At this point, I'm getting like a lot of my military news and events in the Gulf and things like that from Habitual Line Crosser on YouTube. and this guy can, in a few minutes, summarize the situation as good or better than the news, and far funnier. So check him out. But yeah, that's how I'm doing. How are you doing, Weer'd?
I'm doing all right. I like the news of this is a very interesting meme that's showing up in a lot of different places. I should probably try to figure out why this is funny. There's a really cute blonde lady in a police uniform. I wonder what that's about.
Are you talking about the officer who had an affair with multiple men?
I believe it was the entire police department in Tennessee, yes.
Okay. Just wanted to make sure we were on the same page.
Yes. Oh, I'm doing all right. Whatever. There's nothing of particularly interest to report. I will say, Erin, I've been thinking about you with just utter sympathy, is that we are just having again, it's been the most New England of winters, where it'll turn warm and kind of rainy, and then it'll just turn cold and just start snowing and all of that. And it's just high pressure, low pressure, high pressure, low pressure. And my sinuses are killing me.
Yeah. Ow. As someone who has sinus issues, you have all my sympathy. That sucks.
Yeah. No, I had, I'm trying to remember what day. Oh, it was the Thursday before this. Yeah, I went to bed at a reasonable hour. Actually, probably like a super early time, and then woke up at I think it was 3 a.m. with just an ice pick driving into my skull. And I was like, and I had heard the weather report and just immediately knew that it's where the pain was coming from and all that. Oh, it's sinus pressure. Went downstairs, did a sinus rinse, and then spent a little time just sat down in my chair and just took some ibuprofen, sat down in my chair, and just chilled out for a little bit, and the blockage eventually cleared itself out and everything equalized, and I was feeling better. And then just as I was starting to feel tired, my family woke up and everyone was downstairs, and it was time to start the day. And I went, oh, this is going to be rough.
So let me tell you about a fantasy I've had for about 20 years. No, not that kind. One of the things I fantasize about is having some sort of surgical steel ports installed in my head. Primarily, the sinus cavities in my cheek, but in other places as well. And what I do when I'm having a bad sinus day is, I uncover the port and I attach a hose, and that hose, rinses the sinus with warm saline and then vacuums it out. Mm-hmm. And so first of all, if you have sinus problems, you know how amazing that sounds. And the thing is, with the rise of piercing culture over the past 2 decades, you wouldn't look that much out of place. And if things continue, eventually people wouldn't notice. I mean, with the nose rings and the ear gauges and the whatever, just some kind of discrete metal plugs on your face, you'll eventually blend in. And that's something I've wanted for quite some time.
I mean, the sinus wrench could get pretty close. Especially, I find the magic trick is number one. Well, just as you're running, you're finishing up the little blast of saline. Do a sharp inhale, and that will tend to blast that saline up into the nooks and crannies. And then it's got to look hilarious when I do it. My family doesn't seem to say anything when not many people are watching me blast garbage out of my sinuses. But what I will do is I will lean all the way back and essentially point my head straight up into the sky and open and close my jaw as wide as I can while tilting my head as far to one side and as far to the other as I can until I start hearing my ears popping. And then lean all the way forward and do the exact same thing over the sink and just start letting stuff run out of my nose and mouth and all that. And I do that a couple of times, and that tends to work stuff way into the deep nooks and crannies and start and dump them out. and then, then just sit down and just kind of sniff a little bit and stuff will break loose. And sometimes it'll be shocking stuff will break loose.
Part of me doesn't want to know, but the other part is sickened but curious. What do you mean shocking stuff will break loose?
Oh, you'll just be sitting there and you'll be like, "Oh, I'm a little wet and drippy back there now because I just hosed out the inside." And you kind of sniff, little post nasal drip, sniff, chunk.
Oh.
I now have I now have a Jello mold the size and shape of my sinus in my mouth right now. I must get myself to a sink.
Ew.
And it's disgusting, but like popping a pimple, it's disgusting and it feels weird, but it feels so much better when it's done.
Well, at least we've answered a question that has likely plagued our listeners for quite some time.
I'm terrified that they might have been thinking about that.
Well, I mean, not specifically that, but we have answered the spit versus swallow question for you.
Oh, thank you, Aaron. Well, when it's that chunky, you can't lob them over the plate like that for me.
Oh, this has already turned way too gross.
Yes. I suggest we run away and start talking about the news. And so to carry on with now what's becoming a tradition, the start of the news segment, we talk about who's ragging on Wayne LaPierre from the NRA. Because it seems like there's just an endless parade thereof. This latest story, it is one Oliver North, who I must say, again, Aaron and I, we were very vocal against him becoming the NRA president because of the Iran-Contras and the symbolism of that. We considered it to be bad for optics. But I will say his tenure, his very, very short tenure as NRA president and what he has done in the aftermath of his, he ended up resigning, but it was definitely it was definitely a forced resignation, I believe. But he ended up resigning from the as the president. But his all of his actions has shown that he really is a true supporter of the Second Amendment. And so, while it is unfortunate about his criminal and political past, and again, that being bad for optics, that does not mean that he is bad for the Second Amendment as who he is. But one Oliver North was testifying at the in the New York suit against the National Rifle Association, and he specifically described the NRA as a circular firing squad. And I'm trying to see if there's any other juicy quotes. Essentially, he's just recapping a lot of the things that he's been fairly vocal about before anyway. So I'm not, there's not really a whole lot more in here, just that the normies are starting to hear what Ollie North has had to say about Wayne LaPierre and the mismanagement of the NRA.
The thing that I found most interesting about this article is that, being as how we had perhaps not front row seats, but very close seats in 2019 when all this came out, LaPierre and the rest of the NRA pitched it as North basically attempted a coup via blackmail. And the testimony here, and we are mostly in the he said, she said stage, although I will note that it was today, maybe Friday, that Wayne LaPierre has actually started testifying and things are coming out. We'll address that next week. But, well, what I'm getting at is that essentially Wayne was saying, yes, all these things are true. And so this does seem to be supporting Oliver North's statements where he basically said, look, I'm not trying to do a coup. I think that there's lots of things going on, and y'all need to fix this because it will ruin the organization. And instead of fixing this, they decided that they were going to pin the blame on him and force him out.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but this at the time of our recording, this has just dropped. Oddball actually shared it to me as we were talking before the show. But our friend John Richardson from No Lawyers, Only Guns and Money is reporting an email that Marion Hammer of Florida has sent to the board of directors, and it is saying, it has come to my attention that another NRA board member is making phone calls trying to gain support for yet another NRA board of director member to take Wayne's job. Yada yada. Essentially, she's demanding that a special what's the term that she uses, but a special search committee be used to help find a replacement for Wayne LaPierre, rather than these essentially shady against the bylaws backroom dealings that are going on right now with who's going to take this empty seat that hopefully by the time you hear this, it has been vacated by Wayne LaPierre, because this is going to be aired in February, though we're recording this at the end of January.
So this thing about a special search committee, Weer'd, that sounds really familiar. Where have we heard this before?
I'm actually oh wait, was it was it Buzz's letter as well?
Yes, it was.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember his last name.
Mills.
But yeah, that's true. He was also calling for that. The thing that I find most shocking about this is that Marion Hammer, of course, rose into prominence in the 90s. Actually, was she one of the spearheads for getting Florida to get shall issue concealed carry?
I want to say she was, but I can't confirm that at the moment.
But she essentially got herself a lot of street cred in the darkest hours of the Second Amendment, which was the mid 90s in the United States. But pretty much this century, she's really been kind of a pain in the butt, and she's actually gotten in the way of more gun rights laws than she has helped push through, as we know from Aaron's constant frustration with Florida's gun reforms. And she has very much been a staunch defender of Wayne LaPierre when Oliver North's accusations came out and there was the attempt to get him ousted from the board of directors. So I gotta wonder about this. I mean, certainly we've been reporting on it that, yeah, the NRA has not been working under the bylaws at all and has been playing Calvin ball with how to run things. And, but I gotta wonder what Marion Hammer's up to, because while again, she definitely earned my respect in the 90s when I was first starting to learn about firearms and first started getting into the Second Amendment advocacy sphere. But she's really kind of erased a lot of that respect in recent years. I kind of wonder telling me maybe she's asking for this special committee so that she can lobby them and use her powers of persuasion to make it so that maybe they pick her as the best person to be the executive vice president.
That's definitely the feeling I had. And yeah, a quick search, and it was Wikipedia, so we all know how completely accurate that is. But yeah, she has been credited for the 1987 shell issue law in Florida. Now, just because she's credited for it doesn't mean she did it all. I mean, I will grant that she lobbied for it, but I'm certain that there were others who helped. I just don't know if she was the main force or she's just the one that everyone decides was the main person behind it. I don't know. I mean, good Lord, in 1987, we had just moved to Florida, and I was in 9th grade. So I didn't pay much attention back then, and I've kind of been distracted by some things, so I haven't dug into it. Because, really, just for the entirety of my adult life, Florida has been a shell issue state.
Yep, no, that's true. So either way, it's certainly something to be said. Like, also, whether she's as big as her reputation alludes to of her or not, she certainly has a lot of street cred, and she is kind of a household name in the Second Amendment community. Certainly of the more veteran Second Amendment community people, when the people that were part of the federal assault weapons ban fight certainly know the name Marion Hammer, and the fact all that she has done and the fact that she has been such a staunch defender of Wayne LaPierre, and then Wayne steps down and nominates somebody else to take the seat when he leaves. That may sting.
The big problem that I have is, and I can't quite find the references to this. It's likely somewhere on the blog NRA in Danger, is that the NRA has been double dealing Marion Hammer, or she's been double dipping, however you want to say it. Essentially, she's being paid for her duties, but she is also being paid by some sort of Florida sportsman's group, which is funded by the NRA. So she basically gets paid twice for the same job. So my gut feeling is, while the New York AG may not have the same open and shut case against Hammer that she has against LaPierre, that I don't think Marion Hammer is going to get through this lawsuit unscathed.
That would be very, very surprising. There's certainly a lot of talk of, again, the upper echelons of the NRA very much using the funds to enrich their lives. And actually, if anybody gets a chance, I highly recommend you listen to the Reload podcast that got released on January 29th, because he has Cam Edwards on, and this is the first time I've ever heard actually Cam Edwards talking really candidly about his time with Ackerman McQueen and him getting dismissed from them during this falling out period, and his smooth transition over to Bearing Arms, which has been wonderful. I mean, again, highly recommend Cam's podcast. The Cam and Company is a good show, but yeah, but he was talking about the fact that his wife would be telling him, hey, fill out your expense reports when he would get back from, some sort of event and all that. And he would not necessarily be all that interested in doing it because, I could bill my dinner that I had to, my meals to the NRA because I was traveling and I was traveling for work, and that was allowed. But also maybe I just pay for my own food and let the NRA keep that money going through, and And he says, and he said, I wasn't trying to toot my own horn. There were lots of people that were like that, who would do things, just, any little thing to do. Like I would put a postage stamp on when I was sending donations to the NRA, back when I sent donations to the NRA, I would put the postage stamp over the paid postage envelope just to save them a little bit of money. Here, the stamp's on me, not you. And so, yeah, I'll certainly say the idea is, if we can get out of this death spiral that the NRA is in, there's certainly something to be said. Again, we noted that the anti-gun people are like cheering and so excited that this is coming through, and we're pointing out the fact that, hey, hey, guess what? The NRA is has been on people's S list for years because they're not aggressive enough. They're not pro 2A enough, and so the possibility of it being replaced with a far more Second Amendment absolutist group is or absolutist people is very much a thing. And again, being replaced. Again, note that Wayne LaPierre was spending, tens of thousands of dollars on transportation and, $250,000 on suits and all that, but he wasn't buying guns. Interesting. Doesn't actually seem to be that into guns and shooting. Can you imagine if we get an executive vice president who is super duper into guns and shooting?
So I found that piece of information. It is from NRA in Danger, and it's part of Wayne LaPierre's testimony. And so this is a transcript. It's from the transcript given in a court of law. And so the executive vice president's office, a.k.a. Wayne, paid Marion Hammer as a consultant, and she was also paid by NRA ILA. And they also gave her group, United Sportsmen of Florida, $216,000 per year, most of which USF used to pay her. The final bit is that her pay is somewhere now in the range of $200,000 on a 10-year contract. She's in her 80s. She's the same age as my mother, and I love my mom. I wish her long life. I don't think she's going to live for 10 years. So, yeah, she was 82 when this contract came out, and they're going to pay her $222,000 a year for 10 years. Not a good use of money. And I think that the New York Attorney General is going to... Like I'm saying, I don't necessarily know that any of this was criminal or even unethical, but it is definitely financially irresponsible to pay someone 2 or 3 times for the same job. And that's probably going to come out. I mean, yes. It's already partially started to come out, but they may go and do some more digging.
Yeah. So we will see what's happening, but oh boy, this is not the end of this.
No, it's not. And I have no idea if the organization is going to survive.
Again, there are possibilities, but it's going to depend on who is prevailing. Obviously, Wayne LaPierre built up a culture of grifters at the top who were essentially, maintaining their phony baloney jobs. And there's obviously, it's not just Wayne. If it was just one man, it would be pretty easy to take down, but he had very, very loyal acolytes that were protecting him and throwing up interferences and allowing stuff to go through and allowing the kind of short notice super secret votes that he would hold, where essentially he would let his inner circle know that they were going to hold an emergency vote, and then put out like less than 24 hours away that, we're gonna be having this vote tomorrow per the bylaws. You need to notify the board a certain amount of time ahead of time. But it's one of those, like, how quick can you drop everything and get your butt to Virginia? And so that was a way to get a lot of things snuck through. So yeah, we will see if there are people, again, even if they are kleptocrats, there ain't that much to steal anymore as membership slowly dies off and donations slowly die off and all that. So maybe even it's in their best interest to pretend to love and support the Second Amendment so that there might be more interest in the NRA and there might be more stuff to steal. But I don't know. It's going to depend, because also there's a ton of very, very good, very, very motivated, very Second Amendment oriented people. Again, note that, like, Oliver North, we pointed out he was not great for optics, did not say that he was not great for the Second Amendment. He was always been a vocal Second Amendment person ever since I started following the NRA. And so, yeah, there are lots of people like Oliver North who are staunch supporters of the Second Amendment and want to keep NRA alive and want to take advantage of all of the infrastructure that the NRA has. Because yeah, if we do lose the NRA, we're going to replace bits and pieces of it probably, but we can never replace the whole thing. So moving on to the next story. I mean, I don't want to spend too much time on this. This is more of just interesting, is that there was an active shooter in Edmonton, Canada. And so, yeah, this is, it appears that nobody was killed, which is pretty impressive because according to the image, it looks like he was using a Mini 14. So not a small gun, not a and that, but this guy was a security guard. So here's another instance. This is hearkening to Pulse in that this is a security guard with all the background checks going through, but also appears to have some terrorist sympathies to them. And so this guy was evidently carrying out this shooting for the Palestinians. And but the key factor is that this happened in Canada and it happened with a semi-auto rifle.
He also used Molotov cocktails.
Oh yes, he also used Molotov cocktails, which I even forgot about that because again, people focus so much on that, but they forget that no, destructive devices that are super easy to make. They are illegal. Who cares?
But weird. I thought that Canada had very strict gun control laws. I've been told this sort of thing is impossible.
It's spree shooting is only a thing that happens in America, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so, yeah, I've got two articles up on this. One is the Not the Bee, which is an affiliate of the Babylon Bee, but only reports on actual news as opposed to made up stories. And I've got what is this one? The CBC. So one of the Canadian broadcasting. So a partisan leaning and snarky, but boy, they got a lot of good information in here on this guy. But also just the straight up pro Canada national media. And so I think one of the reasons why we're not hearing about it was because he didn't kill anybody, but also it doesn't make Canada look good because again, the stuff that they're trying to completely ban, they're not very successful with. And we applaud this shooter who we will not name for being completely incompetent with a firearm and not managing to kill anybody, and not able to cause any major problems with his fire bombs. And unfortunately, Canada does not have a particularly strict justice system, so likely even if they throw the book at him, it won't be all that bad. But
So in that picture in the article, and it's taken from Twitter, is it just me, or first of all, is the Mini 14, does that not have a stock? Because it doesn't look like he's shouldering it.
He's definitely not shouldering it, and there's videos of him. I think in this article,
it also looks like he's got that aggressive forward C clamp.
Yes,
I'm well. Okay, you don't have to be a trained shooter to adopt that pose, but I've never seen the aggressive C clamp out. Well, I haven't seen casual shooters do it. That's usually the tactical dude bros who do it. And I'm honestly surprised that he didn't manage to hurt anyone.
Well, he's clearly not using the sights. and it appears that if you actually watch the video, which is about halfway down on there, you see him come around. He fires a shot into a glass door and completely spider webs it, or maybe it's several shots. It looks like there might be other shots. And then he quickly dumps the gun. And I don't know if it looks like he's transitioning to a pistol, but I didn't read anything about a pistol. So he might be either getting out one of the Molotov cocktails or something else. But yeah, he's certainly not using the sights. He's got kind of the taco grip over the top of the barrel, and even though then he's got a vertical foregrip down below, which I'm not quite so sure if that's also an illegal thing to do to guns in Canada. I know many of the new assault weapons bans that are being presented by various gun groups, and some that have already been passed in recent years, have made a vertical foregrip on the front of the gun a quote unquote evil feature. But he's certainly not shouldering it. It may be a folding stock version of the Mini 14, or I don't know. But either way, the guy's an idiot. But also, he was a security guard. I don't know if he was. It doesn't say anything about him being like an armed security guard. But
okay, so here's interesting, because I just checked, and we are going on the presumption that this was a Mini 14. But the Ruger Mini 14, among others, was prohibited by the Canadian government on the 1st of May 2020.
Well, there.
So it wasn't just a shooting, but he had a prohibited and illegal firearm. So yeah, Canada's gun control has really been proven not to work.
Yeah, I wasn't making any assumptions, because I know Canada had various cutouts. Like, you would see a lot of Canadians with the CZ, what was it, the 71, whatever, the rifle, the 7.62 by 39 CZ rifle that looks like an AK, and in some movies is being used as a stand-in for an AK. As a matter of fact, the movie Lord of War, the warehouse full of AKs are all CZs. Now I can't believe I'm drawing a blank.
So yeah, basically, Canada had an assault weapons ban, and it banned the M16, AR-10, AR-15, M4 carbine, Ruger Mini 14 rifle, the M14, the VZ58, Robinson
58.
Armament XCR, CZ Scorpion Evo 3, both carbine and pistol, Beretta CX4 Storm carbine, Sig Sauer Sig MCX, and Sig Sauer Sig MPX carbine and pistol, Swiss Arms Classic Green 4 Season Series. I have no idea what those are. Also prohibited firearms with the following characteristics: capable of discharging a projectile with a muzzle energy greater than 10,000 joules, and a bore of 20 millimeters or greater. You want me to put that in the show notes, Weer'd?
Yeah, you can do that. That'd be great.
Okay.
But yeah, but I know the VZ58, which is not really at all related, except in some basic form factors, to the AK. There's virtually no component of that gun is similar, even in the operation of it is similar mechanically. But yeah, that gun, it was one of those. It was legal in Canada, but I guess now they closed that quote unquote loophole. But I say that only because I'm pretty. Yeah, I could go out and buy a Mini 14 or an M1A right now here in Massachusetts, but ARs and AKs are challenging to get a hold of because of the way the assault weapons ban has been reinterpreted. So yeah, we will. Either way, pass all the bans you want. It's not going to make things go away. It may adjust how things play out. But this guy who, again, security guard, lots of background checks, vetted individual, and yet here they are being charged with a spree shooting.
So let's pivot to another country that has very stringent gun laws. And
so stringent that they've even though they have passed extremely sweeping gun control laws, they really haven't done much to their violent crimes. So therefore, they're forced to ban other things,
like knives. And we've all seen the pictures about how in Britain's supermarkets and whatever their version of Walmart is, you can't buy dinner knives unless you're over 18 or 21 or things like that. But this next topic, this is ridiculous, and it's it's ridiculous because of what it's about, and also because it's, as Jennifer, I don't even know if the blog in Jennifer's head is still on anymore, but a while back she had a blog post titled Keep Dancing Monkey. And the idea is that actors shouldn't be dictating policy. Their job is to entertain us. And so their job is to dance for us like dancing monkeys, and we shouldn't have to listen to them in terms of policy. Now, I like Idris Elba as an actor. Well. I think he's great, but, well, he's an actor. He's not a policymaker. Why are we listening to actors? And so he's on a crusade, not just against knives, but what are called zombie knives. And you'll understand what I mean if you don't know what this means. Think of every, Mall Ninja knife, the Tactical, the Bud K. If it looks extreme, if it's done in that particular zombie neon green, just the ridiculousness of it. And apparently they're really popular in Britain, I guess, because young stupid punks think that these extreme things are more dangerous.
I think it's probably also a chicken and egg situation. I think some people, obviously these like goofy extreme knives are popular here as well, in part because they're often cheap garbage, because serious knife makers aren't going to make this kind of crap, because there's a reason why you don't see knives like this very often, because they just don't work. There's a couple of simple knife shapes that are tried and true, and anything that looks really dramatic and really cool probably doesn't work. And so they're often extremely inexpensive, and they're very dramatic and look very exciting and look very deadly. So therefore politicians clutched at their pearls and soiled their trousers, and then decided to pass a law that bans them. And now it's one of those, just like when they banned the very unpopular AR-15 and AK-47 in this country, people went, "You're banning this? Okay, now I want one." So yeah, they are continuing to push for crackdowns on quote unquote zombie knives because they're idiots. And furthermore, crackdowns for carrying knives in public, because oh the horror, oh my God, I feel naked without my knife in my pocket. And yeah, I like to post Britain and Britain's knife bans and ever escalating restriction of freedoms just as a warning, is that they banned all handguns in the UK. They're just not a thing you can really get anymore. Like, actually, I believe the UK Olympic team actually practices in France because they cannot compete in their sport in the UK. They have to travel across the channel to France because France has considerably less strict gun laws compared to England. And so this is an instance of if anybody who's a more FUD, if you will, and they're thinking, oh, if we pass this ban, then we will appease them and we will, if we give up AR-15s, if we give up drum mags, if we give up pistol grips, then they'll be happy and then they'll leave us alone.
If you give a mouse a cookie.
Correct. And they will never leave you alone. The answer is always no. No matter how reasonable and how dumb, Donald Trump infamously said, oh, I talked to the NRA, quote unquote, talked to Wayne LaPierre, and he said that bump stocks are awful and they're not that important, which, yeah, probably, all right, that's probably true. And then he said, so I decided we could ban those. No. Nope. No. I mean, not only is it you're banning something for no reason, but also you're weakening the Second Amendment by saying, oh, we can ban this because dangerous, because scary looking.
Deprive people of their property and of their business without due process. And we got nothing in return for it.
Yep. And again, and it only became the stepping stone for the next thing. Again, look at the various anti-NYSERPA temper tantrums that have been going on, where okay, fine, we'll issue your carry permits, but pretty much if you live anywhere in the southern part of New York, there's going to be very, very few places where you can carry a firearm legally. And that's how we're going to do it now. You've got the permit, you just can't use it. And so, and at no point in time do any of these gun right groups say, oh, New York or California or Washington or New Jersey have just gone too far. We need to roll back some of these things and support actual common sense gun control. No, there doesn't matter what it is, they want it. Like if they can restrict this or restrict that or ban this or ban that, they will do it eventually until they're going after pocket knives.
About the best thing I can say, and I was honestly surprised by this, is, well, the title of the article. Idris Elba warns against mandatory jail for carrying a knife. So he wants to make the knives illegal. And remember, all laws are ultimately enforced by the barrel of a gun. But he also doesn't want this punishment to be jail. Because he says many young men carry knives because they're scared. And so, he wants a deterrent to make young people know that they'll pay a penalty for carrying a crime, but he doesn't want that penalty to be jail. And, well, really, to me, it's summarized that Elba is a British subject. So, of course, he's going to have stupid ideas about the right of citizens to keep and bear arms.
I mean, not only was he born in England, but his parents were born in, I
want to say Ghana, but I'm not certain.
I believe his mother was from Ghana, and I believe his father was from Sierra Leone, I think. But either way, two countries in sub-Saharan but Central Africa, and yeah, so he's purebred to totalitarian tool control. And I actually.
So here's I'm kind of stalling for time here. Just to kind of put a bow on this, I remember a story where Terry Pratchett was going to be knighted, and in proper Terry fashion, he forged his own sword, and in doing so, he dug up some meteorite ore so that he could have a meteoric sword, and he learned how to smelt. And he basically made a sword from scratch, and that's really awesome. And then the story ends, and then, because owning swords is, I don't know if it was illegal or highly restricted or whatever, but it was just, and then he locked it away. And I'm thinking, this man has literally been knighted by the Queen. He is, Sir Terry Pratchett, he's a freaking knight. If you're telling me that someone handpicked by the Queen can't own a sword, there's something desperately wrong with that culture.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially, yes, swords are the assault weapon of their day. If you had a dagger, yes, you can use that to stab somebody. Yes, you can use that to fight. But also you can use that to, carve up a chicken. People would eat with a dagger, back then. But if you've got an arming sword, there's nothing you can do with that but fight. And but they're also big, so you can't really conceal them. So if you're going out with an arming sword, well, hey, guess what? They're gonna find you pretty quick.
Mm-hmm.
And I will note that Jesus told people to get swords. Sell their cloak if you need one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I've got a blog post on that where I investigated that in detail, and there's a very specific term, I don't remember the word, but it wasn't a knife, it wasn't a tool that you could use. It was legitimately, this is a thing that you use to kill people. So it really was the equivalent of a self-defense pistol. So I'm really fond of that. It's a blog post called The Jesus Number. You might want to look it up.
Mm-hmm. I've read it. All right. Last up is a survey that you presented to us.
Longtime listeners of the show will remember back when this wasn't the Gunblog Variety Cast, but that was our predecessor. And Beth Alcazar of Pacifiers and Peacemakers was a regular contributor. And, Beth is a friend of mine, and she has been doing really good work with USCCA. And she is running, for a very limited time, an anonymous gun ownership survey for Concealed Carry Magazine. And I have taken it. It is just 5 questions. It's really, well, how many revolvers do you have? How many pistols do you have? How many shotguns do you have? And it's not even a hard number. It's just a range. And the more entries she has, the more data she has. And, help a sister out. So I've taken it. I'm kind of paranoid. I didn't see anything wrong with this. And she's going to let it run for a very limited amount of time and then delete it. So go there and answer. I mean, I didn't have any problem with it, but I understand that you, Weer'd, you have no organizing system, and so you don't really know how many revolvers you have.
No, I know I've got a bunch. And I don't know the exact number, but it's a range, so it was close enough. But either way, yeah, you posted this in the show notes. I clicked on it just to see what it was all about, and realized, oh, it's a survey. And before I knew it, I was done. It's super easy. It's super easy. So yeah, so go on over to the show notes. You can get to it through whatever podcast app you're using, or you can go to assortedcalibers.com and Aaron has the link there for you there. You can see Beth Alcazar's anonymous gun ownership survey.
Now, one thing I want to say is that she's going to have it only for a limited time. She was originally going to delete this on Friday, but I said, hey, would you like for me to announce this on our podcast? And she said yes. And I said, well, it only drops on Friday for subscribers. So she's going to extend it to sometime next week. So what I'm getting at is, when you hear this, well, you might want to listen to all of the podcasts, but when you're done, go there and do it right then, because if you dawdle, it may be too late.
All right. Well, if you've been following any of the various Gundosphere, the blogs and the YouTube channels and all of that, Aaron and I, we weren't at SHOT and neither was Miles, but everyone's been talking about SHOT Show and the new guns out there. And so Miles decided to give us his favorites that he's seen media coverage of.
Hi, this is Miles with another episode of the Southpaw Corner. In this episode, I'm going to be going over the things I saw so far at SHOT Show that I think are interesting, or I have thoughts on. This is not a complete and utter coverage of everything at SHOT Show. It is just the things I saw via the YouTubes, because obviously I'm not at SHOT Show. I might have a different thought if I was actually there, but these are the things I might be interested in or not, depending on the situation. The first thing I saw that I thought was really cool is that Beretta is redoing these 30 series pistols. They're calling it the 30X. Doing some nice modernization, moving the magazine release, making things a little bit simpler, easier. And I'm really hoping that this is going to carry through to all the 21s and stuff along those lines. So if they redo the 21 series especially, I will have one. I've never wanted one. Well, I've wanted it 21A, but it just, the few things I didn't like about it held me back. If they give it a nice update, I'll have one. If Massachusetts ever lets me, that is. The next thing on the list is that might be interesting, which is the new Diamondback SDR revolvers. They are supposedly the lightest 6-shot 357 Magnum revolver to ever be developed. They say that's the case. I'm taking that their word for right now, and I think they're really nice looking. They look very nice, sleek. They do the over-fluting to drop that weight down like the Ruger LCR series. And if they did it, and they did a nice job, and I ever get a chance to get one in Massachusetts, I'll definitely at least try one out. Next up on the list is the one that I have high hopes for, but I'm a little worried. And this is the only one that is actually still, quote-unquote, prototype. The Kahr X9. The Kahr X9 is what I've always hoped the car would be. I had one of the original cars back in the 90s. The old K series. I believe it was a K9. It was a great gun. The only downside to it was the magazine release, but because of the single stack design, really not a way to make it ambidextrous or reversible. And it's understandable. I was a great gun. I wish I still had it. Unfortunately, when those times when I had less money and had to consider renewing my permit to actually own guns here in Massachusetts, it came down to either I sell one or give up all. So I sold my car, and I don't have it anymore. So the Kahr X9 is going to be their first double-stack magazine. It's also got an optics cut, which is phenomenal. It's got an ambidextrous slide release, and they pointedly say in one of the videos I watched that it is not an ambidextrous magazine release. Okay, that's understandable. Ambidextrous magazine releases are not easy to do. That's why there's not a lot of them out there. But my question is, and every place I've looked, it doesn't say. Looks like it's possibly it could be, but is it a reversible magazine release? Because as anybody who's listened to my segments in the past know, I don't mind reversible magazine releases, but I think that should be a pretty much standard on anything that isn't single stack. And they're not saying one way or another whether it's reversible or not. So this is one of those times where I'm sitting there going, hey, if you're a left-handed person or somebody who cares about the people that are left-handed in their lives, get a hold of Kahr. Ask, is it reversible? Keep asking them until they decide whether or not they're going to make it that way. Because if they do, that's going to give them more sales, and it's going to make us lefties happy. If they don't, it's going to cut back on their sales because people like me may just say, I like it, but you didn't take me in consideration when you're developing it. and you put an ambi side release, which is not as important as the mag release, what's the deal? And now, unfortunately, the last handgun on my list. As everyone who's listened probably has figured out, I'm a Canik fanboy. I am unapologetic about that. I like Caniks. They have a lot of features for the money. They're wonderful firearms. And I'm happy about almost everything they've come out with. Up until the new Terran Tactical Rival. I don't know what they're actually, Terran Tactical Combat, I guess is what they're actually calling it. It's just a dressed up rival with a muzzle brake. Compensated, sorry. And after watching a couple of the interviews with Aaron Butler, who comes off so obnoxious that he reminds me of the only male baboon at the zoo, proclaiming himself the greatest because all the other baboons want him. Now, you're the only one. They don't have a choice. You're just an obnoxious bastard. But that's just the impression I got watching the videos. And realistically, what was his contribution to this firearm? He said, "Oh, I need more aggressive grip on the prey." So they added more aggressive gripping. "Oh, I don't like those slide serrations. They don't look like mine. Change them to look more like this." Okay. "Oh, your flute barrel is not spiral fluted. Oh, you got a spiral flute, the one that's got my name on it." And, yeah, I want the bronze color, not the gray. Okay, yeah, so you did a lot of tweaking of the design that Canik's making. You didn't really have a whole lot to do with it. Canik's making all of it, except for maybe the +3 round magazine extensions. They're saying those are actual Terran Tactical ones. So what? There are other companies out there who have been supporting Canik and Canik products for years, Taylor Freelance being one of them, that you can get a lot of these things from. So this Terran Tactical Combat Canik, who cares? Give me that barrel, they'll fit a regular rival, and I'll be happy. I don't need to spend $1,000 on another Canik just to give that pompous guy money for looking at it and saying, "Oh, I don't like that." That's really all he did. So that's my thought on the pistols that I saw. There were others, but those are the ones that really stuck out to me. Like, hey, I have an opinion on these. 3 of the 4, I really want to try. The last one, sorry, it's a dud in my case. So there were a couple of rifles I saw as well. Both of them actually happen to be lever actions. The first one being the Smith & Wesson 1854, which I'm hoping a lot out of for this, because I like Smith & Wesson as a company, and it looks like a really nice all-weather version, at least. I'm not interested in the limited edition wood and black. I like the all-weather look. It's a 44 Magnum, which is a wonderful caliber for kind of an all-around good rifle. It's small enough where you can get enough shots into the tube to be useful at 9+1, and that's 10 rounds with 44 Magnum. Can't really complain about that. It's good for small varmints that you need to take care of on the farm, or actually in some states you can even go hunting with it. It's a great little thing, and I'm hoping for great things, and I'm wondering what this is going to mean for Smith & Wesson moving forward as well. They're reintroducing something they haven't made in forever. You know, I don't think anybody alive actually is around the last time they made a lever gun. Or if there are, they're pretty damn old. And I'm old. So I'm really hoping for good things out of Smith & Wesson. I'm hoping this means they're going to revamp some of their revolver line as well, and it could be a real good time for all of us when it comes to Smith & Wesson. I like the fact that it also has a threaded barrel. Yes, here in Massachusetts, it does me absolutely no good, but maybe someday I can get out of this god-awful state and go someplace where I can actually have a suppressor for it. The other one I saw, which really, it was what I was hoping would come out after I saw the Henry Long Ranger last year. It's like, ooh, magazine fed, 223, lever action. This is great, but this proprietary magazine only holds 5 rounds. That's going to be expensive to get extras, and it's only 5 rounds. You know, hopefully they come out with a higher capacity magazine down the road. Well, they did one better. They came out with the Henry Supreme lever action, which is basically a long ranger that takes PMAG. So, 5-round magazine? Sure. 10 round? Sure. 20? Sure. 30? Yep, you can do that too. Hey, we can even put a drum on there. Granted, the drum may interfere with the lever. I'm not sure. I don't think it would, but it might be close. But it's a lever action that comes in either 5.56 or 300 blackout. Takes PMags, and I gotta love it. I mean, if I ever get a chance to get my hands on one and try it out and it's good, I'll probably own one. Do I need one? No, I don't need it at all, but I want it. So that's my thoughts of what I saw so far at SHOT Show that I found interesting. There's, like I said, I'm a Canik fanboy, and unfortunately the Canik fell on its face for me this year. Outside of that, everything else has potential. I'm just hoping that they are good quality and I can get my hands on them. Thank you for listening to Southpaw Corner again, and if you have any questions, comments, or things like that, please let Weer'd or Aaron know, and I'll be happy to help you out or answer your questions.
So, Aaron, have you seen anything particularly interesting at SHOT Show?
Well, I haven't been going over all the different videos like you have. I know that you're going to be very interested in that. Oh, I don't know that it's an FN clone, but the
FNC clone.
Yes, there we go. That was presented by Gun Jesus in a Kilt.
Mm-hmm.
So I will admit that, like Miles, I am interested in the Henry Supreme because I don't own any lever guns. I would like to own a lever gun. But here's what I immediately thought of. Now, y'all have to reach back into the Wayback Machine of your mind, because I don't quite remember when it was. But there was a time when Mossberg came out with a completely tactitarded lever gun in, I want to say 3030. And
yes.
It was called the 464 SPX. And it looked like something out of Firefly, which to me is a feature. A lot of people hated it because instead of the blued steel and wood, it was black steel and polymer, and there were rails on like 3 sides, and the stock was a telescoping, AR stock. And it never really found a market, and I can't find it anywhere on the Mossberg website. I'm sure that they discontinued it because it didn't take off. And what I immediately thought of when I saw the Henry Supreme was, that's what that rifle was missing. If instead of being chambered in 30-30, if they had chambered it in 5.56 or 2.23 and made it eat from Stanag magazines, it would have received a lot more acceptance and probably would still be being produced, because I think that's a fantastic idea. And I wonder how many other calibers Henry's going to chamber that in.
Well, I certainly could see them stepping up to the 308, and if they're stepping up to 308, then you can get like your 6.5 Creedmoor and that sort of stuff. But like anything that you can fit in an AR mag.
Mm-hmm.
450 Bushmaster. Make a nice little brush gun.
So yeah, that's really the only thing so far. I like I said, I've been dealing with a lot of other stuff. And so I'm not up on all of the cool things that have come out of SHOT Show. But Weer'd, is there something that you have your eye on?
I mean, as the co-host of Handgun Radio, the handguns have most excited me, and we actually did it was actually David Oddball and myself and Ryan all sat down and did a SHOT Show episode of Handgun Radio. And yeah, the Miles pointed out the Diamondback revolver, which looks alarmingly like the Kimber K6, and yeah, it's super duper lightweight, but it's also all steel, which is kind of surprising. I expected it to be either aluminum or polymer, but that's that's certainly interesting, and it'll be interesting to see if Diamondback makes it to a quality level that will be acceptable, because they've certainly been known for their guns being very budget friendly. I'll just leave it at that.
It just looks like a revolver to me, Weer'd. What's the appeal?
I mean, just it's a compact 6-shot 357 designed for concealed carry with a nice short barrel.
We already have those.
It's a revolver thing, Aaron. You wouldn't understand.
Okay, I'll accept that.
Yeah, and of course, Miles points out that Kahr is now getting into the double stack market. I for a long time, for my my lighter carry gun, my pocket carry gun, I had a Kahr PM45. I still have a Kahr PM45. It was 45 ACP. It's about the size of a Walther PPK. Which is smaller than a Smith & Wesson J frame, and it was in 45 ACP. Perfect. And furthermore, Kahr makes larger magazines for their guns that all cross fit, so you could have a 7-round reload offhand. So it was a really good step up, since my first pocket carry gun was a Smith & Wesson 642, so a little 5-shot 38 special. So 5+1 shot of 45 ACP was a big step up. And then SIG introduced the P365, and it held twice as much ammo, and I just I got to trade up, and it's smaller and it's lighter. I had to trade up, and I still miss my Kahr, and I love how Kahr firearms shoot. And but they're going for this, and they're going, and it's supposedly going to be taking 365 and Springfield Hellcat magazines. So that's another big plus. So therefore, when this gun hits the market, you'll be able to easily buy larger magazines if you want to carry the gun as compact as you can, but have an extended magazine for your reload.
So the Daniel Defense 9, I've been seeing that it's basically a remake of a gun that I'd not heard of before, because, again, I'm not as much into handguns as you are. I'd never heard of the Hudson H9.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so
what's going on with that?
The Hudson H9 was essentially I don't know if it was true. I'm trying to remember exactly how the action worked on it. When I actually was handling one at the NRA annual meeting, it was when they first introduced it, and the patent hadn't come through, so they were being very, very careful about showing the internal components of the gun. But they essentially made a tricked out polymer framed double stack gun that was kind of competing with the Glock market, but designed to have a really, really nice trigger and an extremely low bore axis, and so therefore would be much more gentlish in shooting. And people were very excited about it. There was definitely a lot of interest. They sold a whole bunch, and then they said, well, you know what? We've got this steel framed version. We're going to come out with an aluminum framed one. And everybody who was going to buy one said, cool, I'll wait till they come out with that one. And they immediately went bankrupt, because they were hoping that the sales would continue the way they were, and it would fund the production of the aluminum framed one. And no, people just said, okay, we'll hold out for that one. And they just couldn't get it over the hump. And so they went bankrupt, and clearly Daniel Defense bought the IP. It wasn't known, at least publicly. It seems like everybody that was under an embargo said that they knew about it. But I had never heard who had bought out the IP for Hudson. And but Daniel Defense evidently did a complete redesign of it. So there is almost no parts interchangeability, including the magazines, which it is. I think they said it's not a Hellcat magazine, but it's not a Hellcat magazine. I think they The original Hudson H9 was using a Smith & Wesson Model 59 magazine, and this one is probably using a Hellcat magazine as the template for the magazine. But yeah, they've redesigned everything. The proportions are totally different. It's an aluminum frame. And so, yeah, it'll be super interesting to see this. I think David said his shop is getting one. So maybe we'll be hearing a segment from David pretty soon about how it shoots.
So it's the Ship of Theseus 9mm.
Yeah, kind of. Kind of, yeah. No, it's just they just completely redesigned it, and so Hudson was they're really, really cool guys, and they were really, really brilliant gun designers. But it's also their absolute first gun that they made. So there was definitely some rookie mistakes that they made, both in the production and in the marketing of it.
So a gun without ammunition is just a paperweight, but a gun with a bayonet is a spear. Our Knife Guy Oddball is here to tell us more about these gun knives.
Welcome to Oddball's Corner Pocket. Recently, I heard a friend of mine, that should have known better, repeat the old statement that the triangular shape of older bayonets was chosen because it would leave a wound that wouldn't heal. This is one of those things that I wish would die, so I figured I'd address it here. While it's seen as of little use these days, the bayonet used to be seen as an essential part of a soldier's kit until not too long ago. The idea is fairly simple. You stick a blade to the end of your rifle, you've got a spear that you can stick the enemy with. Back when soldiers were sporting bolt-action rifles, and even more with muskets, it wasn't unusual for them to end up in melee combat. In fact, back in the day of muskets, it was pretty common to fire off a couple volleys and then enter melee range. Once in melee range, the soldier that already has a melee weapon deployed obviously has an advantage. On top of that, with some exceptions like trench warfare, the soldier with the longer melee weapon also typically has the advantage. You can see how having a sharp, pointy thing at the end of your rifle sounds like a very good idea. Some of the earliest bayonets were simply daggers or short swords that had handles shaped so they could be stuffed into the muzzle of a musket. As things progressed, it was determined that it would probably be better if the bayonet was attached in a way that would allow the firearm to actually be used as a firearm with the bayonet attached. This development generally led to a simple spike with a socket that slipped over the barrel of the gun. So, what does this have to do with the triangle shape? Simple. It's easy to manufacture and can be brought down to a sharp point while maintaining a good amount of strength. You're not really going to be slashing with a bayonet, so there's no real reason for a sharp knife's edge, just a strong, sharp point for stabbing things. The shape was chosen for no reason other than it is structurally strong and provides a sharp point for stabbing the enemy. Sure, a triangular wound is harder to close than a flat one, but it's not exactly impossible, and the medical profession has been able to deal with them for a very, very long time. You can see the same development in swords. The small sword has a similar profile. This sword was mostly used to duel and was closely related to modern-day épée. It was used much like a rapier, and stabbing attacks were very much favored over slashes. Incidentally, this was one of the last swords to be used in actual battle and can still be seen in many military dress uniforms. So, if it wasn't a war crime, why did the world move away from the triangular bayonet? I think that it had more to do with trying to make it multifunctional more than anything else. As anyone in the military will quickly tell you, soldiers have to carry a lot of stuff. Anytime they can reduce that, that's a good thing. As repeating firearms started appearing on the scene, many armies decided to combine their bayonet with their field knife. Of course, there's also some examples where the bayonet could be confused with a short sword, and the US even toyed with the idea of making a bayonet with the blade shape of a bolo machete. Of course, this leads me to my other pet peeve myth of bayonets. The idea that some countries serrated the back edge of their bayonets so they would cause more grievous wounds. This is also BS. The real reason that some bayonets were serrated was, again, to be multifunctional. The idea was that it could be used as a saw. This is especially useful for military engineers, where they may routinely need to saw through small branches or wooden planks. Again, being able to have your field knife and bayonet to be one item instead of two was great. If you could also leave your dedicated saw at home, awesome! As for use in combat, frankly, I see the serrations as a detriment rather than a plus. Sure, the serrations have a chance of chewing up someone's insides, and there's people that will argue that, oh, well, it was designed to then be pulled out and pull out the soldier's organs instead of just leaving them there. But it also greatly increases the chance of the blade getting stuck on a bone or something. If that happens while it's going into the guy, the blade isn't going to go as deep, and therefore it's a less effective stab. If it happens while it's coming out, well, there's a pretty good chance that the weight of the body on the other end will rip the weapon out of your hands. Oh, and remember that blade is attached to your rifle. So, yeah, there goes your rifle, too. Now, unlike the triangular spike bayonet, it does appear that the use of a serrated bayonet is banned by the Geneva Conventions starting in 1977. I honestly think that this has to do more with propaganda and mythology than fact, but it wouldn't be the first time that that's shaped policy or law. I hope that this was interesting and informative. If you'd like to read more on my thoughts, I can be found at gunscarstech.com. If you have any questions, comments, or suggestions for future segments, I can be reached at oddball@gunscarstech.com or on the ACP Facebook page. Until next time, have a good one.
So, actually, interesting side note is I was actually watching a brain surgery video on YouTube, and they generally do like a star-shaped cut to open up the dura, which is just under the skull to expose the brain, and so. Yeah, it's a bunch more difficult to close than just a standard straight cut, but it's not at all impossible.
Well, only because you brought it up. Why do they do that? What's the benefit to the star-shaped cut?
I believe the dura per its name, it's very, very strong. It actually feels like a like a plastic bag. It's a very, very tough tissue that's designed to essentially keep all the cerebrospinal fluid inside the brain, and that is the blood-brain barrier if you're at all into medicine. And so I think they do that as a means to open up because it doesn't stretch like other tissues. If you're going to have an appendectomy, they would, they'll cut a small hole in your abdomen and then they get the retractors in there and they stretch the skin out so that they have plenty of room to work. But then when they let it all go, it's just a little small slit again and they can sew it up easily and it has minimal scarring. But I think in this case, I don't think it stretches all that much. And so they want to be able to, they cut that window in the skull for a reason, and they want every last bit of that to be available for them to work in.
Well, that's fascinating and gross.
Yeah, well, I like surgery, and I like bayonets.
Yeah, well, I like bayonets too. And this is one of those things that doesn't necessarily make sense, but humans don't necessarily make sense because that's psychology for you. But, okay, if you've got a gun, you might shoot someone, and most reasonable people would say, I don't want to be shot. But if you've got a gun with a knife on it, then that is more scary to a lot of people. I mean, they may just go, oh, wow, there's a knife on there. Or they may say, well, hey, I might try and close the distance, but I might get stabbed. And so there is a psychological deterrent to having a bayonet on a gun. And that's why all of my long guns have bayonets.
I mean, that's awesome. Further, there's also the angle of you talk about like, oh, in a home defense scenario, you come around the corner with your rifle. What if they grab the barrel? Well, you can discharge a shot and see what that does to change their mind. But also if it's got a blade on the end of it, that's certainly something that makes it far more dangerous to grab a hold of a gun that you don't want them to grab a hold of.
Mm-hmm. So I actually have one of those cute, silly little pistol bayonets.
I have one too.
Here's the thing. I don't have it on a pistol, but both my pistol caliber carbine and my shotgun have a rail mount right at the muzzle. So if I decide I need a little bit of stabby stab to go with my shooty shoot,
mm-hmm.
I can put that on there. Now, I have no idea if the little rail mount is going to hold when it sees action. But the thing is, I'm not counting on it. If it works, that's nice. If it doesn't, oh well. But it might give me a psychological edge. It might give me a brief moment of stab before it breaks.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah. So before you write in, yes, I know it's silly. It's probably dumb, but I like it.
But also at the same time, so long as it stays on the rail while you're doing your thing, it does certainly add a razor sharp edge to your gun while that somebody else might be hesitant to grab a hold of.
Mm-hmm.
Or might not be hesitant to grab a hold of, but might soon wish that they had hesitated.
Yep. Again, it's a spear that shoots.
And finally, to keep the variety in this variety show, Xandar continues his series on farming, now talking about water and drainage.
Welcome to Independent Thoughts with yours truly, Xandar Opal. Last segment, I talked about clearing land of unwanted vegetation. This week, I'm going to go over water, both wanted and unwanted. Irrigation and water management is as old as agriculture. Irrigation canals, and the remnants of them, are common in the Fertile Crescent in the Middle East, many still in use today. In the American Southwest, one can find remnants of irrigation canals used before climate changed. As I recall, it was before Europeans began immigrating to the Americas. Shovels, hands, and baskets were used to direct the surface water to help thirsty crops. Archimedes and his water screw, basically a coiled tube or a group of tubes spinning to elevate bits of water at a time, was an immensely labor-saving device, as folks didn't have to dig down as far to channel water away from the source toward the fields. In more modern times, we have the luxury of engines to drive pumps, to move water through pipes and drip or spray on fields. In my father's and grandfather's times, they would lay out 4-inch irrigation pipe, aluminum with quick connect ends that have rubber gasket and literally hook together, then screw in a sprinkler into a fitting every 30 feet. After a section of field was watered, they'd drain the pipes, pick them up, move them over some 30 feet, and reprime the pump to water the next bit over. In my youth, I remember helping with a cart that had a centrally mounted irrigation gun with a 1-inch nozzle. We'd unhook the pipe from the cart, lay more for something like 60 feet, hook it back up, and then go at it again. Quicker and more convenient, but not as good as the current standard. It was a wonderful thing when we got our first self-winding reel. Similar to the cart, but with a 1/4 mile of 4-inch heavy plastic hose. Aim the back of it at the strip we need to water, set the mechanism to allow unwinding, hook the tractor up to the wheeled cart on the end of the hose, and take off. We'd set a relay of watchers, no cell phones, to signal when the reel was almost completely unwound. We did not want to have to fix a break in that stuff. We unhooked the tractor and set the irrigation rig to wind, and it would divert a tiny bit of water to power the winding ratchet, while it watered the strip of field, a good 60 feet across or more. We didn't have to tend it like previous systems, just keep an eye on it in case something went wrong. Every 8 hours or so, we'd have to move it, which beat every couple hours, and with minimal labor. We still had pipes that had to be laid, running to the rig from the pump, but it was still pretty good. Our current setup has buried pipes along the edge of the fields, near enough to the irrigation pond, with risers we can hook a flexible hose to. Many farms have gone a step further with the iconic center pivot irrigation systems. These pump water from a well, typically, and automatically cover a massive area. These systems are quite expensive, however, and lack the flexibility of being able to be used for anything other than the fields they are installed in. As with many things, what works for some doesn't work for others. In a transition to the other side of this discussion are water sources. I've mentioned wells, rivers, and ponds. There's an intermediate source, where there's a high water table that makes for a swampy field in all but the driest seasons. A drainage tile buried some 10 to 20 feet down doesn't count as a well for our local regulations. Something a couple feet across will accumulate quite a bit of water and allow us to pump it from where we don't need all that water to a section of field that does need it. Turning overly wet ground into something more usable for farming is another thing nearly as old as agriculture. Digging a surface channel will drain the ground a bit. A large hole or crater will create a nice pond as well. To quote a cousin's grandpa who passed away of old age some time ago, you stick a bunch of dynamite on a stump in the middle of a swamp, light it, and run. When the sugar and turtles stop flying, you got yourself a pond. That is only partial hyperbole. A ditch on the farm's property was said to have been dug by a series of blasts, except the charges were chained wrong and went off simultaneously. It said there were some broken windows in a town a few miles off. Crisscrossing the ground with ditches to bring water here and away from there gets pretty problematic, as they block travel across fields, or folks need a road to go through. To that extent, drainage tile lines are placed. The originals were actually ceramic tile tubes that allowed water in, but not much in the way of particles of soil. Those had to be dug and buried by hand well below the depth of tillage, and also sloped to lead the water to the desired ditch or pond. Things get more complicated if you have sidelines leading to a main one like the roots of a tree. In modern times, perforated plastic tubing is used that is conveniently rolled up. A massive plow-like machine knifes it into the ground to the desired depth, guided by a surveyor's laser level. A backhoe is used to dig up junctions, or an excavator, and make it easy to join multiple lines together, or to an outlet that is covered by a grid or grill that prevents critters from making nests and plugging things. Shoot, I got unplugged that line this spring. Sewer rat is commonly used, and over 100 feet worth of that stuff. And I need to wade through a good flowing ditch while doing so. I'll give us another acre back. Anyway, where was I? Despite mostly filling the trenches back in, there's still a bit of cleanup to be done after one of these operations. A few passes with a dozer blade and a disc harrow smooths things out, mostly, but after a bit of rain, it is easy to get even the biggest tractor stuck in one of these trenches before the soil firms back up. Last time that happened, we ended up actually unhooking the tank spreader from the tractor, pulling the tractor out with a smaller tractor because the one that got stuck was our biggest one, and then towing the spreader backwards with the biggest tractor once it was on dry enough ground. I should probably check that spot, see if there's ruts to fill in. Speaking of surveying and surface work, sometimes you do want controlled water runoff to prevent a massive mud puddle from forming that drowns crops before it drains through the soil. One of my favorite memories of working with my father was helping him do some surveying of rented ground to determine how many inches of topsoil to scrape off from where to allow controlled runoff. Several fields also have what we call grass waterways. They follow low points between hills and aren't quite a ditch, as well as having permanent grass sod to prevent erosion. Now that we have some fields that aren't too wet or too dry, we can plant the crops, right? Oh, but there's a few more steps first, which I'll go over next. Have fun, be safe. I hope I gave you something to think about. Oh, and Weer'd, could you also include a link to Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel? That has some excellent references to the early on agriculture that I mentioned.
I feel like a opportunity was lost for him to title "Let Me Level with You."
Yes. Oh, this was. I mean, I'm really enjoying this series. I'm looking forward to the next one, and I will note that Xandar seems to be dealing with a lot of the similar problems that my farming relatives in northern Maine have, which is too much water. Fields get soggy, vehicles get stuck in it, and then, but of course, we got to note that further out west, we've got a lot of farmland that is in either arid or straight up desert land. And that's just, they generally do not have an issue of too much water, except in those desert flash floods, which is kind of terrifying.
There's a certain irony in dying in a flash flood in a desert.
Yeah, well, I mean, just all that vegetation is going to want to soak up water. And if you don't have a lot of vegetation, then, and the ground is all hard packed and dried, well, if you get a lot of rain, it's going to just flow right off.
Yeah, I understand that. I'm just saying it's...
You're drowning in the desert, yes.
Yeah.
And Xandar talking about clearing out the swamp. It reminded me of a story that my great uncle told once that is still sticking with me today. Is he was a potato farmer, and he talked about how one day his father had to go out of town for the day, when he was like a teenager, and told him to plow one of the fields. And it was particularly rocky. And he, after about the third or fourth time that the plow got stuck on a large rock under the surface, he instead went out to the local hardware store and bought a case of dynamite. Teenage boy, dynamite.
Back when you could.
Yeah, no problem. This was different. These were different times. And then when the plow would get stuck, he'd simply get out, dig a hole under the rock, throw the stick of dynamite into the hole, and keep plowing. And he was hoping that it would shatter the rock into cobble, and that would be much easier to either sweep up or plow around. Instead, according to his story, it kind of sounded like the field ended up looking like Stonehenge when he was done. The rocks were just stood straight up. And his dad wasn't very pleased with that.
So it was enough explosive to bring the rocks to the surface, or they just sat,
yes,
as opposed to blowing them into pieces.
Correct.
Yep.
Or maybe it blew them into pieces, but pieces far larger than he was expecting. But I mean, he probably ended up doing his dad a favor once the rocks were up to the surface where they could easily get a hold of them, and once they dragged them off the field, I'm sure it was much easier to plow.
Oh my God, this is so dumb. Speaking of plowing, thanks to each and every one of our listeners who we'd like to plow if we could.
Do you want to keep it in, or is it too risque?
I don't care.
We'll keep it in. Yes, thanks to each and every one of our listeners, but a very special thanks to all our supporters on Patreon. To become a Patreon patron, go to patreon.com/Assorted Calibers podcast to sign up. Patrons get an early release of the podcast, plus bonus content like the hilarious blooper reels, the ACP film tracks, and the ACP mag dump.
Also, please remember to rate us on Apple Podcasts, subscribe to us on the platform of your choice, and share the show with your friends, both online and off.
I got a blog. It's weerdworld.com. That's WEERD world.com. And hear me weekly on Handgun Radio on the Firearms Radio Network.
And you can get more from me at Linktree/Aaron Paulette. That's linktree.ee/Aaron Paulette, all one word.
And this music here is by Nate Spencer.
He has no idea how many revolvers he has, and I'm actually surprised I have as many as I do. Our revolverage is assorted, and so is our podcast. Good night, everyone.
Good night.